He said the farm wasn't mine, said I'd left too long ago to still belong. But soil doesn't forget the hands that turned it. And I never really left. I grew up on that land. The white house with peeling paint, the red barn that leaned a little with every storm, and the fields that stretched past the tree line like a tired sigh. That farm was everything I knew before the world told me I was supposed to want more. My father, Robert, built his entire identity around it, around waking up before sunrise, drinking his coffee black and calling himself the only man this land ever needed. He used to tell my brother, Luke, one day this will all be yours. He'd say it right in front of me, with that proud fatherly grin that burned like sunlight through glass. I would stand there pretending not to care, pretending to be busy feeding the chickens or stacking hay. But deep down, I knew what he meant, and what he didn't. Because in his eyes, daughters didn't inherit farms. They got married. They moved away. They baked pies for holidays and sent polite Christmas cards. I was 15 when I started realizing how invisible I was becoming. Every decision, every harvest, every fence repair, it was Luke's responsibility. He got the truck, the new boots, the praise. I got help your mother. It wasn't cruel, not in the way stories usually go. It was quieter than that. It was being left out of the photos. It was hearing, don't worry about it, sweetheart. Luke's got it. It was realizing one day that no one even asked if I wanted to stay. And still, I stayed longer than anyone expected. I was the one who stayed when the storm took half the roof off the barn. I was the one who called the insurance company, who sorted the paperwork, who spent nights doing math by lamplight so Dad could make the next payment. I was the one who cleaned the mud off Luke's boots after his parties left the yard a wreck. But none of that mattered when the talk of inheritance started. It began on a Sunday. The kitchen smelled like burnt coffee and hay dust. Dad sat at the table with his old ledger book, flipping pages like he was trying to erase time. Luke leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, smirking like someone who already knew the ending. Dad didn't look up when he said it. The farm goes to Luke. You'll be taken care of, but this place, it's meant for him. I remember my throat closing, my palms going cold, taken care of, like I was some burden to be managed. I wanted to scream that I'd earned it, that I'd given more hours, more sweat, more love than either of them. But instead, I just nodded, because that's what good daughters did. That night, I sat in the field behind the barn, watching the porch light flicker. The fireflies danced above the corn rows, and for the first time, I felt like one of them. Tiny, glowing, and unseen. I left the next morning with nothing but my old truck and the quiet promise that one day I'd come back differently. Not to fight, not to prove them wrong, just to stand on that land and know it couldn't reject me anymore. For the next 10 years, I built a life on my own. I went to community college, studied agricultural management, worked part-time at a feed store, and rented a small apartment above a bakery. I learned to budget, to save, to invest. Small things that didn't seem heroic but made me strong in ways that the farm never had. Dad and I didn't talk much. Luke sent short messages every Christmas. Hope you're doing well. Nothing more. But then one winter, I got a letter. Not from them, from the county assessor's office. The envelope was thin, official, stamped with a notice I didn't understand at first. When I opened it, my breath caught. It was a property tax notice, and the name printed at the top wasn't Luke's. It wasn't Robert's either. It was mine. For a long moment, I just stared at it. My name, my old address. The same farm I grew up on. I thought it was a mistake. Some clerical error, some glitch in their system. But when I called the office, the woman on the phone double-checked the record. Yes, ma'am, she said. It's been in your name for a while. Transferred from your father's holding company back in 2016. I froze. 2016. The same year Dad told me to let it go. My voice shook as I asked, "Can I get a copy of that deed?" She emailed it to me within minutes. And there it was, the legal record signed and stamped. My father's signature, mine beneath it. It turned out that during one of those chaotic years, after a storm, after the repairs, he'd added me as a co-owner for liability purposes. It was supposed to be temporary, but the transfer had never been reversed. And now, all these years later, when the taxes came due, they came to me. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, the glow from my laptop reflecting in the old scar on my hand from when I'd once cut myself fixing a fence wire. It felt poetic. The land had remembered me even when the people didn't. I didn't tell anyone at first, not Dad, not Luke. I just paid the taxes quietly and kept the receipts. But part of me knew the day would come when they'd realize who really owned what, and I was ready to let the truth do the talking. When the second letter came, I didn't hesitate. I paid the taxes again, directly online using my own account. This time, I printed the confirmation and slipped it into a folder I labeled The Farm. It felt strange, touching something that had once belonged to everyone but me. My name wasn't just ink on paper anymore. It was a boundary, a quiet declaration that I existed. For months, nothing happened. I went on with my life working at the co-op, managing small accounts for local growers, and spending weekends walking along the river. But sometimes at night I'd pull up satellite maps of the farm. I'd zoom in on the old barn, on the dirt paths I used to run barefoot down. It looked smaller than I remembered, but maybe that's just what distance does to things. Then one evening Luke called. His name flashing on my phone felt like a ghost suddenly deciding to talk. "Hey, Em," he said, his tone falsely casual. "Listen, Dad got this notice from the county. Says taxes haven't been processed under his name. Do you know anything about that?" I felt the air tighten around me. "Maybe," I said quietly. "What kind of notice?" "The kind that says someone else paid it." He gave a nervous laugh. "Dad thinks there's been a mix-up. Some clerical error." I could almost see him pacing, phone pressed to his ear, one hand running through his hair the way he did when he was in over his head. "Maybe," I said again, letting the silence stretch. "Or maybe it's not an error." There was a pause. Long, brittle, like ice cracking on a frozen pond. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said softly, "sometimes the system remembers what people forget." He didn't answer. He just muttered something about looking into it and hung up. 2 days later, I got another call, this time from Dad. His voice hadn't changed. Still deep, commanding, the voice of a man who never asked questions, only gave orders. "Emily," he began, "we've got a problem. The county says your name's on the title." "That can't be right." I stayed calm. "It's right, Dad. I checked." "Checked?" His tone sharpened. "You checked? When did you get involved in farm business again?" "When my name started showing up on the bills," I said. The silence that followed was heavy. Not angry yet, just disbelieving, he finally exhaled. "I must have signed something wrong back then. That storm year? But you know how it is, like paperwork, legal mumbo-jumbo. I'll get it fixed." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "You can try. Excuse me?" "Dad," I said, my voice steady. "You can't fix something that's not broken." He sputtered something about calling a lawyer, about how I didn't understand property law, about how Luke had been taking care of the farm all these years. And then, without meaning to, I said it, the line that changed everything. If he's been taking care of it, why hasn't he been paying the taxes? The silence that followed was long and hollow. "Don't you get smart with me, Emily," he snapped finally. "That land's been in our family for generations." "I know," I said quietly, "and now it's in mine." He hung up on me. That night, I didn't cry. I just sat by the window watching the wind roll over the dark fields beyond town. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to earn a place that had already been mine, just buried under their pride and paperwork. A week later, I drove back home for the first time in almost 5 years. The gravel road was the same, uneven, lined with wildflowers, the smell of dust and alfalfa thick in the air. The white farmhouse leaned even more now, the paint peeling in long curls like skin. The fields looked overworked, the soil dry and pale. When I pulled into the driveway, Dad was on the porch, arms crossed, hat low. Luke was beside him, jaw tight, pretending this wasn't awkward. Dad didn't wait for me to speak. "You're making a fool of yourself," he said. "You can't own what you don't work." I looked past him toward the barn, the same one I'd repaired after that storm. The same one I'd nearly cut my hand open on when I was 16. "I did work it," I said quietly. "You just never saw me," he scoffed. "So what? You're gonna take us to court? Your own family?" I took a deep breath, the kind that steadies you before you say something final. "I'm not taking anyone anywhere," I said. "I'm just not giving it away anymore." I could see Luke's jaw tighten. He wanted to say something, but Dad raised a hand, silencing him. "Listen to me," Dad said. "You don't understand what you're doing." "There are contracts, loans, liens. I've read them," I said. "I know exactly what I'm doing." And then I handed him a folded envelope, the property tax receipts, the deed copy, the county letter. He didn't open it. He just stared at it like it was poison. "You think you're better than us now?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, Dad. I just finally think I'm equal." I turned and walked back toward my truck, gravel crunching beneath my boots. I didn't look back. As I drove away, I saw the old oak tree at the edge of the property, the one we used to climb as kids. Its branches were thinner now, worn by time. But it was still standing, still rooted, just like me. That night, I made another folder, Phase 2, because something told me this wasn't over yet, and for once, I was ready for the fight. After that day, I thought the silence would be my peace. But in my family, silence always meant something was being planned behind closed doors. The first sign came 2 weeks later. A certified envelope slipped under my apartment door. Inside was a letter from my father's lawyer. Cold, impersonal, full of words like reassignment, clerical error, and revocation of ownership. The final line read, "Please sign the enclosed document to correct the filing discrepancy regarding the family farm." I read it twice, then 3 times. They weren't asking. They were demanding. There was no "Dear Emily." No "We'd like to discuss." Just an assumption that I'd fold the way I always had. But that girl, the one who apologized for existing, the one who worked quietly in the background, she was gone. I placed the papers neatly on my kitchen counter, made a cup of tea, and took a slow sip before calling the number at the bottom of the letter. The lawyer picked up on the second ring. "Mr. Grant," I said, "this is Emily Hayes. You sent me some documents about the farm." There was a pause, the kind people use when they're rearranging their tone. "Ah, yes, Ms. Hayes. Your father asked that I reach out." "There seems to be some confusion." "There's no confusion," I interrupted softly. "The deed's in my name. You can confirm that in the county database." He cleared his throat. "Yes, well, these matters can be complex." "Not this one," I said, still calm. "It's pretty simple, actually. You can tell my father I received his request, and I'm declining it." I hung up before he could respond. That night, I printed everything, the deed, the tax records, the lawyer's letter, and put them into a binder. Then I made 3 copies. One went into my safe, one to my bank's safety deposit box, and one to a friend who worked in real estate. I didn't trust anyone else, least of all the people who shared my last name. A few days later, Luke called again. His voice was quieter this time, almost friendly. Hey," he said. "Listen, we all got a little heated. Dad's just old-fashioned, you know? He's not trying to take anything from you." "Then why the legal papers?" I asked. He sighed. He panicked. "You know how he is with control. Maybe just sign them to calm him down. You'll still be part of everything. Part of everything." That phrase made my stomach twist. It was the same one he used when he got the truck, when he got the raise, when he got the farm. Part of everything always meant less than half of anything. Luke, I said quietly, I'm not signing anything. He tried laughing it off. You're making this bigger than it is. No one's trying to hurt you. Maybe not intentionally, I said, but that's what makes it worse. After that call, things started shifting. My father stopped calling altogether. Instead, messages came through Luke, short, clipped updates. Dad says you're still confused. Dad says the lawyer will fix it. Dad says you're embarrassing yourself. But what they didn't know was that I'd already hired someone. 2, a title lawyer recommended by my boss at the co-op. Her name was Teresa. She had the kind of calm confidence that didn't need raising her voice to be intimidating. When I explained everything, she smiled faintly. Let me guess. Your dad and brother are running everything in his name, but your name's the legal owner on record? Exactly. Then they've got a problem, she said. Not you. We filed a notice of confirmation with the county office, a simple document reaffirming my ownership rights. It wasn't flashy, but it was enough to make any future transfer require my signature. When the county clerk stamped it, I felt something shift inside me. Not revenge, not even satisfaction. Just quiet certainty. That same week, I drove back to the farm again. This time, I didn't go to confront anyone. I went to walk the fields. It was early morning, dew on the grass, sunlight barely cutting through the fog. The old barn creaked like it recognized me. I ran my fingers along the fence rail, feeling the grooves from when I'd carved my initials there as a kid. Then I saw them, Dad and Luke, standing near the porch, talking low and sharp. I didn't need to hear the words to know they were arguing. When they noticed me, both froze. Luke forced a smile. You're up early. I always was, I said. Dad didn't bother with small talk. What are you doing here? Checking on my property, I said simply. His jaw clenched. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Watching your family squirm, I shook my head. No, Dad, I'm just watching you finally see me. He started to speak, but I raised a hand. You always said this land rewards hard work. Maybe it finally did. I walked past them toward the field, the tall grass brushing against my jeans. Every step felt like reclaiming a heartbeat. I'd lost somewhere between obedience and silence. Behind me, I could hear Luke muttering, "This is gonna ruin everything." And maybe it would. For them. But for me, it was the first thing that ever felt right. That night, I got a voicemail from Luke. His voice was shaking. Dad's furious, he said. He says if you don't fix this, he'll contest it. He'll drag it through court. I listened to it twice, then deleted it, because I knew something they didn't. The truth doesn't need defending when it's written in ink and backed by time. By late summer, the whispers had already reached town. Small places like ours carry stories faster than the wind. Some said I'd forged the documents. Others said I'd tricked my father, taken advantage of his age. Someone even told the postmaster I was planning to sell the farm to developers. A rumor so absurd it almost made me laugh. Almost. But when you grow up learning to keep your mouth shut, it's strange how easy it is for others to fill that silence with lies. The next time I drove into town, people didn't wave as they used to. Mrs. Collins at the diner stopped mid-sentence when I walked in. The cashier at the feed store counted my change like she didn't trust my hands. That's when I realized this wasn't just about land anymore. This was about control. And my father had found his oldest weapon. He couldn't take the deed from me, but he could try to take my name. So I let him. For a while, I stayed quiet, just like they expected. I smiled politely, kept receipts, recorded calls, and made copies of everything. When Luke accidentally left a tractor blocking the entrance road for 2 days, I called the sheriff, not with anger, but with documentation. When Dad's lawyer sent another correction request, I replied through mine. Each line precise, each fact verifiable. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't loud, but it was working. And the more calm I stayed, the angrier they became. One afternoon, I came home to find the barn doors wide open and the interior trashed. Bags of seed torn open, tools scattered, footprints in the dust. At first, I thought it might have been kids, until I saw the tractor tracks leading straight from Luke's truck. That night, I didn't cry. I sat on the porch with a flashlight and a cup of cold coffee, staring out at the dark field, thinking about how long I'd lived in fear of losing something I'd already earned. The next morning, I called the sheriff again and then my insurance agent. Document everything, Teresa, my lawyer, told me when I called her after. Don't clean up yet. Let them see what they did. By the time the deputies arrived, my father was already there, pretending to be concerned. What happened here? He asked, his voice full of false worry. I looked straight at him. You tell me, he bristled. Don't start accusing not accusing, I said evenly. Just noticing. The sheriff came over, clipboard in hand. You're Ms. Hayes, right? We'll file this as vandalism. Any idea who might have done it? I glanced at my father's boots, the same brand of tread printed in the dirt behind him. No idea, I said softly. But I'm sure it'll come out eventually. Later that week, I took the report straight to the county office and added it to my growing file, the one labeled Hayes Farm Ownership and Incidents. If they wanted a battle, I was going to make sure the paper trail did the fighting. Still, I wasn't made of stone. Some nights I lay awake wondering why he couldn't just love me without competition, why everything had to be earned, even the right to exist. I remembered all the times I'd fixed his breakfast before school, all the nights I'd stayed up doing paperwork for the farm when Luke forgot, the birthday cards that never came, the "we're proud of you" that never arrived, all of it, erased under a single lie. She doesn't belong here. Then, one quiet evening in late August, my father made his final move. I got a call from the county tax office. The woman on the line said politely, Ms. Hayes, your father came by today. He was trying to pay the property tax, but the bills are under your name now. He seemed surprised. I smiled into the receiver. Yes, I said. I imagine he was. The next day, I received a copy of the new tax statement. My name in bold across the top. Owner of record, Emily Hayes. I stared at that line for a long time. Not because it was shocking, but because it was proof that truth, once written, doesn't fade. A week later, Dad showed up at my apartment for the first time in years. No warning. No call, just a knock. When I opened the door, he stood there in his worn denim jacket, face weathered but eyes burning. You think you've won, don't you? He said. I met his gaze. I wasn't playing. He stepped closer. That farm's my life, I nodded. Then maybe you should have protected it better. His lip trembled. From anger or regret, I couldn't tell. For a brief second, I saw the man who'd once taught me to ride a horse, who'd let me sit on the tractor with him when I was 6. But then it was gone, replaced by that same pride that had ruined everything. You'll regret this, he said finally. Maybe, I replied, but I'll regret it as the rightful owner. He left without another word. When his truck disappeared down the road, I exhaled for the first time in months. The air outside smelled of rain and dust, that scent you get right before the soil drinks again. And I realized something then. Revenge doesn't always arrive in flames. Sometimes it comes as a letter, a signature, a quiet legal truth that no rumor can undo. Autumn arrived the way it always does in our town, slow and golden, with the air thick with dust and memories. I hadn't been back to the farm in almost a month. The last time I stood there, my father's truck had disappeared down the gravel road, carrying his pride with it. I didn't go back out of fear. I went because I needed to see what was left. The gate creaked the same way it used to, the paint flaking from years of neglect. The fields, though overgrown, still smelled of earth and rain. The old oak by the barn was losing its leaves, pieces of amber falling one by one, like time shedding its weight. I walked slowly across the yard, my boots crunching over dry soil. Every step felt like revisiting an old wound that had finally scabbed over. Inside the barn, the air was thick with silence. My father's tools were still hanging on the wall, each in its familiar place. The old radio sat on the workbench, still tuned to the country station he liked. And on the far side, nailed crookedly to the post, hung the faded calendar from the year he'd first told me, "This farm isn't yours." I stood there for a long time, just breathing. For years, I thought peace would come when he apologized, when he finally admitted I'd been enough. But standing there, surrounded by the ghosts of every task I'd ever done for him, I realized peace had nothing to do with him anymore. It was mine to take. That afternoon, I called Teresa, my lawyer. "I want to keep it," I told her. Not to spite him, just to make it what it should have been. She smiled through the phone. "Then let's start by getting the insurance claim approved. After that, we can restore the barns under your name." And we did. Week by week, repair by repair, the farm began to breathe again. I hired a local crew, people who'd known me as the quiet daughter who never fought back. They worked with care, and for the first time, my signature at the bottom of a check didn't feel like rebellion. It felt like ownership. Then one afternoon, a white envelope arrived. My father's handwriting, shaky but unmistakable. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity, or maybe forgiveness, got the better of me. Inside was a single folded sheet. "Emily, I heard you've been fixing the place." "That's good. I couldn't manage the taxes this year. They said they'd contact you." "I suppose that's how it should be now. Your mother would have been proud of you." "Don't sell it. Keep it in the family." Dad, I read it twice. There was no apology, no admission of wrong. Just acknowledgement, the smallest seed of respect, buried inside a field of pride. And strangely, it was enough. The next week, I drove into town for supplies. The same people who once whispered now nodded again. Not because they'd changed, but because truth, once written, doesn't need defending. I stopped by the diner. Mrs. Collins poured my coffee, smiled, and said, "Heard you're running the farm now." "About time someone did it right." I just nodded. "Yeah," I said softly. "About time." That winter, the first harvest came in stronger than I expected. I sold enough hay to cover next year's taxes, and enough pride to finally sleep through the night. Sometimes I still think about the moment Dad told me the farm wasn't mine. The way the air went still, the way my throat closed around the words I didn't say. But now, when I drive down that same gravel road, I don't feel the weight of his words anymore. I feel the steadiness of my own. The sign at the end of the road still says, Hayes Farm. But there's a new one under it now, Emily Hayes, owner. I didn't build it to prove anything. I built it so I'd never again forget what's already mine. And in that quiet, after the wind settles and the last leaf falls from the oak, I finally understand revenge doesn't always look like victory. Sometimes it looks like peace, and a name finally written where it belongs. Winter gave way to spring, and the land began to breathe again. I could feel it even before I saw it, the thaw beneath the soil, the whisper of grass trying to return. It was the first season I'd managed the farm entirely on my own. No father's orders. No brother's shadow. Just the rhythm of work and the kind of silence that doesn't ache anymore. I woke before sunrise every day, the way I used to when I was little. Only now there was no one to impress. I did it for me. The coffee tasted the same. The rooster crowed at the same hour. But everything else felt new, like the farm itself had decided to let me start over. One morning, while sorting through a box of old files in the farmhouse office, I found something I hadn't seen in years, my mother's handwriting. A note yellowed and soft at the edges, it said, "Keep your roots deep, Emmy. People can take what's on the surface, but they can't reach what grows beneath." I sat there for a long time, holding that note, feeling something break loose inside me. For years, I'd chased acknowledgement, validation, fairness. But my mother had already given me everything I needed, a reminder that roots don't ask for permission to stay. Later that day, I drove into town to pick up some supplies. When I walked into the hardware store, Luke was there. He looked different, thinner, tired, eyes heavy with something that wasn't quite anger anymore. He turned when he saw me, hesitation flickering across his face. "Emily," he said quietly. "Luke." He scratched the back of his neck. "Dad's not doing great. He's been real quiet lately. Keeps talking about Mom's old garden," I nodded. "I figured." He looked down, like a child caught between pride and regret. "You were always better with the books." I didn't know about the taxes. I swear I didn't. For a second, I wanted to believe him. Maybe part of me did. "You could have asked," I said gently. "Instead, you let him make me the enemy," he sighed. "I didn't know how to stop him." "Neither did I said. "So I stopped trying." He nodded, the words sinking deeper than I expected. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and handed me a folded photograph. It was from the year Mom planted her first garden, me, Luke, and her, standing beside rows of marigolds and corn. My father had taken it. "I thought you'd want it," he said. I took the photo. "Thanks." When he left, I didn't feel vindicated or angry. I just felt done. The kind of done that comes when you finally stop rehearsing old conversations in your head. That weekend, I went back to the farm and walked to the spot behind the barn where my mother's garden used to be. The soil there had always been rich, even when everything else felt barren. I dug for hours, slow, steady, the way she taught me, until the sun dipped low and the sky turned the color of copper. Then I planted marigolds again, row by row like memory stitched into earth. When I finished, I sat on the ground, dirt under my nails, sweat on my skin, and looked out at the field that had once been the center of every fight. It didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like home. I thought of my father, stubborn, proud, aging. Maybe he'd never apologize. Maybe he didn't know how. But it didn't matter now. The truth was already written, not just in the papers or the deed, but in the soil, in the work, in every sunrise I greeted alone. That night, I walked up to the porch, turned on the light, and for the first time the house didn't feel like his. It felt like mine. And as I stood there, listening to the quiet hum of the land, I whispered into the air, not out of spite, but out of freedom. "You said it wasn't mine, Dad, but it always was." The wind moved through the fields, gentle and steady, as if agreeing with me. Because in the end, revenge isn't about winning. It's about returning to yourself, to your truth, to the place they said you didn't belong.